banking liquidity, we're still talking about that. And I am still curious, Daniel, why it's so high. I'm still curious. Like, I as much as you have given us, you are suspecting this, maybe you can just, pull.
Well, Elsabe, I have to tell you, I've been digging around now for the last 2 or 3 months, trying to find the source of, if we were talking about 3 billion or 4 billion, that's no big deal. That fits the pattern. That is sort of part of the picture of the normal Namibian economy. And then last year, November, it started hitting 7 billion on a daily basis, daily banking liquidity. And then I said, wow, there's something cooking here. I can smell my wife is preparing something, but I don't know what she's got in that pot. And I'm not allowed to go lift the lid and take a peek what's inside. I usually get wrapped on the fingers when I do that. So I got that same impression, because in the past, coming from where we came from, in that very crunchy part in 2017, no liquidity, zero liquidity, negative liquidity, struggling banks, struggling economy. When we sort of averaged 5 billion on a daily basis, it was nice, it was comfortable. You could see that there's sufficient liquidity available. And this was beginning of 2020. And all expectations were that the economy is now normalizing.
Yeah.
And then during COVID, there was you could see, okay, the economy is struggling again, but the reasons were very obvious. You didn't need a big, massive computer or a fancy program or a very clever analyst to figure it out. It was obvious why everything was shut down, basically.
Yeah.
And then 2021, it sort of came back. It was never negative. I don't think it was negative. Can't remember, but it was impeded. So there were again constraints in liquidity in 2021, but it improved. Now this is always very important if you try to make an assessment of economic performance. Is you have to look at the trend. The nominal values are not that important. The trend is the important thing. Because a graph that goes down and keeps going down goes into the red at some point, and then you are in trouble. And a graph that rises and keeps rising is a good sign. And you don't want it to rise too fast. You remember, there's a natural rhythm in the Namibian economy, like in any healthy economy. And so you don't want to upset the economic card too much. If you boost it, like the Bank of Namibia did in 2021, you do that carefully, graciously. You don't come in like a big boxer and bum 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 bum. Because there's always unintended consequences in economics. You have to handle the lady very delicately. She's a temperamental lady, the Namibian economy.
Okay.
You mustn't just do things. So this is what happened, and this is why it started. It caught my attention towards the end of last year, when suddenly it went from 7 to 8 to 9 to 10, and this year to 11 to 12. Now we haven't hit 13 yet. But 12.8 is the highest. That means that the trend, you remember what I said about the trend? Which way the curve is going? It's going up. And I've explained in the previous part of our talk that this available liquidity is not utilized. The companies are not borrowing it for productive investments. So it just sits there and it just accumulates. And I've speculated enough from where it comes from. But what's very important, I looked at the Bank of Namibia balance sheet. Now, interestingly, the Bank of Namibia updates its balance sheet every month.
Yeah.
And what I'm sure you don't know, and what very few people know, is that it's not as if they want to. It's not part of the ESG, the environment, social, governance structure. They are forced by law. The Bank of Namibia Act compels them to publish. They have to publish every month the updated balance sheet before the 15th. So it's very strict. And it's, I actually chuckled about 3 or 4 years ago. I think it was 2019, where they failed to do that. And then I wrote an article about it. And somebody talked to somebody else. And suddenly, this whole part of the statistics they produce were jacked up. It suddenly started functioning the way it should, especially when I pointed out in my article, it's not as if you want to. The Bank of Namibia Act says you have to.
It's a must.
It's criminal if you don't publish, if you don't update the Bank of Namibia's balance sheet every day. That's just on the side. The point is, I looked at the constituent elements. And there are some big movers in there. The Bank of Namibia always holds a very substantial ZAR, South African rand position. And it's usually there in the region of about 28 to 30 billion. What they have available, or what they keep. Now, remember what I explained in the first part of the talk, that the commercial banks, they work on a buffer. They sort of have to make sure that they have enough money available to service their clients on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Now, the Bank of Namibia, they have the same mandate, but their clients are the banks, the commercial banks, not the man in the street. So they have to ensure that as the commercial banks are the facilitators of transactions between businesses in Namibia and in South Africa, there must be sufficient South African rand available to effect all those transactions, basically to pay for all the stuff that we import. So that is why you usually see a large component in the region of 28 to 30 billion. And then all the other components are also not static, but in line with what I expect. The only erratic element is the government deposits. Now, remember, the Bank of Namibia, the central bank, is also the bank to the government.
Yeah.
So if the government needs money, it goes and it takes it from the Bank of Namibia. If the government has money, and it actually has a lot, it puts it in the government account at the Bank of Namibia. And there you see massive movements. In 1 month it will be minus 1.5 billion. In the next month it will be positive 1.2 billion. So it jumps around a lot. But it still doesn't explain to me the riddle of the high liquidity. And I can tell you now, it is not just academic. About 2 weeks ago, I sat in a meeting where we discussed investment conditions. And all the analysts in that room were asking the same question. Is the high liquidity going to last? Because that is the important thing to answer.
Yeah.
The liquidity is high now. The people, the owners of companies and the managers of companies, what they want to know, what's important to them is the answer to this question, will it last? Because if they start regaining their confidence in the economy and they start taking up credit, they want the guarantee that the available liquidity will remain sufficient.
And we unfortunately have to end with that one. Thank you so much for keeping it locked to the power station. If you've just tuned in and you've missed on the talk that we've had, you can, of course, go to economist.com.na and listen to what we have spoken. We did talk about banking liquidity. Mr. Daniel Steinman, thank you so much. Thank you so much for keeping it locked to the power station. From me, Elsie Bitimnyani.